who we surround ourselves with matters. And to surround ourselves with people who say we're doing well means we are ensuring stagnation. Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of the seven-figure journey. My name is David Gilliland, here with Elite Entrepreneurs. Delighted to be your host today. We're more excited about Alessandro Gerbini, who is joining us. He owns a business, Gathers Granola. Sandro, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yours is a kind of a fun business. I mean, who makes people's custom little granola in mass manufacturing for people all over? You do that, but you've had your own brand, which has really been your big focus, is getting that brand into major distributors instead of just the various, let's say, sort of specialty shops around. Tell us a little bit about your journey, maybe a 30-second why you got into this and where you're at today.
So I got into it because of my mom's recipe. My mom had been making a granola as a care package for me in college. I realized there was something to it when my very much non-granola friends would eat my care packages before I can get my hands on them. I introduced it at a farmer's market while an underemployed college student between semesters, and it quickly became a full-time business as it got drawn into the market by local stores and eventually supermarkets. The business right now is different. We went through something of a phase change and are now primarily a contract manufacturer in terms of our revenues, doing the same thing we did for ourselves in scaling up a recipe and bringing it to market, only for other people, other brands who have made the wise choice of deciding manufacturing and brand building are two very separate disciplines.
So they're letting you do the manufacturing while they focus on the brand building.
Right. That's right. Very
cool. And that's an interesting challenge, right? Everyone's got their own recipe, their own thing, their own way. Custom jobs in a manufacturing, I've watched that happen across a lot of industries. Make it steel or shoes, or like there's this variety of but it can be challenging to really do that well at scale for so many different requirements. How do you guys manage that? And what's that kind of look like? You had to build some interesting processes to be able to do custom work through them.
So it began with ourselves and solving the problem for an N of one, our brand, our flavor. From that original flavor, we span off a couple of additional flavors, all of which share a huge amount in common in terms of process with the original. Those commonalities led to easy decisions around ovens. We know which oven is going to be the perfect way to scale. We went from a home oven to a very small commercial oven, to buying an oven that had been at a Subway, to buying ovens that roughly cost the same amount as a middle-of-the-range BMW. And now we have multiple ovens of that kind where you roll in racks of product. You can do thousands of pounds an hour. Down the road, there's even a further scale where it's all being conveyed automatically through a tunnel oven. That stepwise function of automation is something that we've been following, always trying to find the best practices from the industry. In no small part, our own experiences having our products shopped out by contract manufacturers have helped inform us as to what the next step is in our own automation process. Turns out that mixing is the crux for granola quality. Obviously, the composition of the flavor matters a ton, but the mixing, the agitating, whether it's before the bake or during the bake. I know, David, you've got your own recipe at home. I bet you stir it during the baking process. As Alton Brown would teach you on the best YouTube videos on how to make granola, turns out there's almost nobody doing that at scale. It's extremely expensive. It violates the rules of touch it once in manufacturing that you hear espoused so often, but it is deeply connected to quality outcomes. So figuring out how do we still preserve the value proposition of these entrepreneurs that are coming to us and entrusting us with their family recipes and end up with something that is not more expensive than they can afford and commensurately more expensive than their customers can afford, while still being of exceptional texture and taste.
Yeah.
So that's the problems we're trying to solve. And in many cases, we do solve it. In some cases, we don't.
what's fun is those problems. I mean, you're solving them for a product in a process as they move through, and there could be 1,000 ways to do it. You can no longer at scale pull a pan out of an oven, take a spatula, turn it over, chop it back up into small pieces, lay it back in, and do, because you'd kill yourself. All your margins are out the window, right?
So that's what we do.
It's like, that's exactly what we're after right now.
For about 50% of our clients, that is a requirement. And I'm fairly confident in saying we are, out of the 40 or so contract manufacturers that do this professionally, contract manufacturing granola, we are in the vanishingly small minority. It's possible we're the only one that's willing to do that. We found a way to generally make it work financially, but it's also fair to say that there is a price consequence for those decisions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you could move on to new processes. You could move on to things where you're like, hey, if we're going to push more through and keep the margins down, now we can have a vibrating conveyor belt that goes through a hot and ready style pizza oven that shakes it, right? And that does the same thing, right? And has this great effect in what it would do. So sure, you could come up with all sorts of ways to pull it off and to fix it. One of the challenges in our growth, though, isn't just the manufacturing process. As you get more people, the old processes of leading your teams have probably changed too.
Totally.
Right? Like, what are some of the lessons you've learned around maybe your team as it's grown in size? Like, this is kind of how I've needed to lead them differently. I used to be it was just you originally going to farmers markets. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a whole team selling, and you've got people who are who are producing and the shipping and all that kind of stuff. What kind of processes had to change there to help it work at scale for you?
So we've automated. I have delegated effectively several critical pieces of the business successfully. There are several pieces we can talk about that I have failed to delegate effectively. Those where I have failed to delegate effectively tend to be the biggest pain points for me personally and the biggest pain points for the firm. I remember distinctly early on in our history, after I made my first hire, but before we got our first real space, making it halfway through a batch of granola, and only then discovering that we didn't have the requisite inventory of sugar to complete a batch. That was extremely painful, and as a consequence, we started making a concerted effort to build a robust inventory management system that could project precisely the inventory shortfalls on different key elements and ensure that they were just available on the floor when they were needed. Making sure that the buffer wasn't so big so that we were eliminating muda or waste in the form of inventory. As it is, that still remains a key performance indicator. We're always trying to minimize the amount of inventory we're holding on to. So at this point, I have manufacturing on fly-by-wire pretty much completely. Insofar as I'm associated with what's going on in the bakery or inventory, there's a major problem. Everything operates much more smoothly when I'm focused on other pieces of the business. So there are a couple key things for that. First and foremost, the procurement team, the individual who's in charge of buying ingredients, ensuring that ingredients are the right price, that they match our specifications for the facility, whether it's kosher or organic or non-GMO or gluten-free, whatever the certifications on the package might require. Single individual, lights out, trained to do just that task, does it exceptionally well. Same for inventory management from a warehouse manager, whether it's inbound or outbound freight, billing customers in a time-effective manner. Another critical piece in ensuring what you need is there on time. And then from the actual making this production side of things, we have two critical individuals. We have a director of food safety who makes the plans that ensure that everything we're making is following good manufacturing practices and honors hazard analysis, critical control point plans, HACCP, for that initiated. This is an approach that identifies the critical areas where there's an opportunity for a customer to get injured or somehow exposed to chemicals, materials, pathogens in food, and then eliminates those risks and tests for the negative outcomes before any product makes it out. Finally, there's a production manager who does all the scheduling, all the training, and is on the floor at all times when product is being made. So 4 individuals working in tandem so that I never have to be involved.
Yeah, but those were things that you learned and you owned for a while. Each one of those steps, right?
Yeah, poorly on mine. Like
but had to do.
I still am not HACCP certified personally.
and for each of the roles, you now have clear metrics of success that help to ensure it's not just here's your activities, but here's the results have to come from the work that you're doing, which has helped you in that delegation process. We kind of heard you talking through those. That's fantastic. And what a key to growth. As you pass that $1 million, you can't keep holding on to pieces. You've got to delegate. You've got to do it well and get out of there.
Yeah.
And now you see these people do a lot better job than you ever did. They could just do it really well. What other nuggets have you learned in your scaling? Maybe some insights or lessons learned you could share with the audience.
One of the fascinating ones that just came up late last week was around mentorship and cultivating a group of people that care about the company, care about you personally, care about the outcomes that you can lean on. I keep a sticky note on my monitor both at home and at work to remind me to cultivate that group of people, to ensure that I'm continuously reaching out and asking questions that are relevant, that are actually meaningful to me, that are meaningful to them, so they remain engaged. That's something that I've not always been black belt at, but that I strive to be black belt at. That network of people have been material to ensuring the company continues to exist, whether it comes from a financing or helping us avoid big mistakes or untangle big mistakes. And that's something that I personally benefited from greatly. It also happens to be that they tend to be the folks that are the biggest advocates for the brand outside. That word of mouth is not trivial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't pay enough attention to this piece. So this is quite the nugget. I really am glad you're sharing this. The best leaders, they don't do it alone. They know they can't do it alone. Even the people who are in like what you would consider individual sports or whatever, they've got these coaches, they've got these mentors, they have these people they turn to. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we forget that if we don't intentionally cultivate those, they're not there when we need them. And when we do, that can be mentors. It could also be an official board of advisors. You could organize this even tighter. But I really love that insight. They have been there. They care. And if we cultivate that, they'll help us get to the next level. So thanks, Sandra. That was great. Great insight.
Do you also see there's sometimes a risk, like you were saying, with athletes, with people in the public limelight? There's, I don't want to say it's a tendency, but you do see it where their selection criteria for those individuals shifts from those that are potentially critical, asking the hard questions, to basically yes men, people that are just there to emotionally support, but not challenge.
I think that shift tends to happen more when we're letting our ego get in the way. So when we're trying to build up our ego, or when we love how it feels when someone says we're doing well. And sometimes we go for that dopamine instead of the high that comes from solving really hard challenges. And so hopefully, and I think you bring up just a good point. Who we surround ourselves with matters, and to surround ourselves with people who say we're doing well means we are ensuring stagnation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're ensuring it.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I always operate best when I'm being challenged, even if I have to kind of fabricate the notion that I have an opponent. Best example that comes to mind was in the process of due diligence. First time around with outside financing, and I had a cost accountant really, really scrutinizing our forecasts. And that process was unbelievably motivating, and I think ended up with a deeper engagement in the subject matter, a better work product on the quality of the forecasting, the quality of the business planning than otherwise would have existed. I found a way to get really upset over somebody who had nothing but good intentions.
I also find that we don't even need an outside person to make our nemesis to really drive us. Like if we really want to be driven by this competition and things, it's wonderful to look at yourself and to say, here's exactly where I've been and how I've delivered. And here's where I need to be. And where I am now is a third, a fifth, a tenth of what I need to be. Not just in like numbers, performance, but who I am as a leader, as a person, my own. So I need to build my body, my mind, my skills, my attributes, even my care to a level that could succeed at this 10x level. Have I gotten there? Right. And to just be really clear of who you want to be and say, my present self is the nemesis.
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
I know everyone's like achieved that sufficiently.
I know everyone like pushes on this self-care and you need to love yourself and be okay with and do this. And like, yeah, sure. But it's a lot more exciting to say, here's my future self, and I'm not putting up with what I am today. I know we can be better. My team deserves better. Our customers deserve better. We can be better, and I'm the one that's in the way. How do I get the current me out of the way and embrace the new me?
I love that. Yeah, that's something that I can aspire to do better in myself. I think I'm more in the self-nurture than might necessarily be productive.
Well, nurture yourself with great granola, but let's push on ourselves in our progress. Well, everyone knows where they're at right now and what they need. If they need healing, let the healing happen. But if it's growth time, let's grow.
It's growth time, David.
Yeah, it's growth time. So, what are you working on now? Maybe there's something we could help with. An idea or two. More than likely, no, but there's a chance. So why don't you tell me what you're doing, and maybe we can throw in a nugget.
I'll start with a piece that's working that we're trying to 10x. So in the period of 2018, 2019, really starting around COVID, we went from having a single contract manufacturing client and the rest of our business being our own brand, Gatherers Granola. The contract manufacturing client came to us because they had heard about us through a local network at a local university and said, my wife and I have a flavor we really want to make of this granola, general granola category of product. Can you make it for us? To which our response was, in theory, yes. We've never done it before for anybody else, but yes, we have that skill set, and we definitely have the capacity. As you're probably familiar with, in the world of manufacturing things, there's always this push-pull. There's a race between capacity and demand. And if demand exceeds capacity, really bad things happen. If capacity dramatically exceeds demand, all that buffer headroom between demand and capacity is overhead costs getting amortized across everything you're making, effectively making it more expensive or less profitable. So operating in a world in which we are reducing that headroom, but always have capacity exceeding demand, operating near or at capacity is the gold standard. So we started saying yes to more of these opportunities, and we started building intentionality around attracting that kind of business, contract manufacturing interest. At the moment, and for a very long while, the primary path has been a single Google ad operating at a low level of input, a low level of spend. But due to the nature of the marketplace, for a while there, we were seeing just about the entire country's deal flow for contract manufacturing services, seeing deals that were far too big for us. What gave us a advantage was our speed of response and the quality of response. So we were the prospective partner that actually responded at all to emails. This was a critical customer piece of feedback, was nobody else is responding to my inquiries. And they're basically impossible to find. They're hiding 5 layers deep through a local university's manufacturing extension partnership or agricultural extension partnership. And we heard they might be in the business of making granola, but we're not actually sure until they actually respond to us. And so there's a huge amount of opacity in the marketplace. It is not optimal for entrepreneurs to find a partner. We try to make that a little easier. by paying for the eyeballs on a Google search. As we see it, the vast majority of people in the business of making a decision as to where a granola product is going to be made are starting fairly early on with the Google search for a manufacturing partner. So we just try to identify what are all the keywords that are going to show up in their searching and ensure that those keywords are on the page, written out, that they're in the hidden text data for keyword searching that can be scrubbed by Google, that we're paying for keywords against those two data sets, and that we're constantly optimizing the target demographic specifications, location specifications, just to make this cheap ad work well. The efficacy of those ads was high, so high in fact that we were able to basically sit back and just let it run. And it brought in the potential for tens of millions of dollars of business, most of which we had to say no to for reasons of fit. A lot of them were too big. Many of them were too small. Companies that would eventually get to the point of outsourcing their manufacturing, but had volumes so small that they couldn't fill a single mixer once every 2 months. So it's really not worth entertaining it. Now, at this point, we see that the next layer of innovation for inbound marketing needs to take place. The efficacy of those ads has been reduced by other folks in the industry noticing and starting to advertise against us. So now we're looking at things like this conversation, doing it internally in a podcast form where we talk about our experience as a manufacturer, interfacing with customers, interviewing customers who have exited their businesses while having us as a manufacturer, once they're no longer embargoed by non-disclosure agreement, talking about that experience of taking a product in a home kitchen, bringing it to a manufacturer, getting it into supermarkets across the country and across North America, and then selling their company to an Amazon aggregator or something along those lines. Sharing our own internal stories as to the trying to untangle what is brand building, what is manufacturing, insofar as they overlap, how can they overlap in terms of skill set and individuals, and to what degree are they two separate disciplines? These are things that we'll be exploring through dialogue like the one we're having now.
All right, so how can we be of help? What's the question that you want to pose here that we can perhaps help you take a next step forward?
There's a lot left on the table in terms of the quality of content, in terms of questions around frequency, in terms of questions around tone. How detailed do we want to get in these conversations in podcast form? What is the right cadence? I understand that you dramatically increased your cadence in putting out podcasts in the last 24 months. I imagine there's just a lesson to be learned there on our side of things as we just get started with this process.
All right. Well, this is definitely a different type of question. I'm used to leadership and people and systems around that, but here's a little insight into some things we've learned in a podcast world. One, there's a lot of noise in podcasts. So there's a lot of competition, a lot of people out there, a lot of people doing things. And the important thing is are we delivering very relevant content to our listeners? Are we tight enough around who's listening in? And are we being extremely relevant? Second, if you can get a podcast out when it comes to content generation in general, on the daily, or let's say at least 3 times a week, it stands out over a weekly or a twice a month kind of podcast. You just shoot up quite a bit in the rankings and people begin to see it more. So what it is that if you have faithful listeners, they don't want to wait a week for something. They're people who are listening on their drive. So give them something every time they're driving. And so if we go to broader businesses, what's a problem they care about solving that's really eating at them? 2, is there a place I can go to that over and over again I'm taught, I'm instructed, I find out more? And then 3, is that now a brand that I could trust and turn to for help eventually? Right?
These are precisely the questions I'm hoping to answer successfully, especially as you phrase them regarding the brand building. In our prep for our meeting today, I was describing how my own capacities as a brand builder have been challenged by successive failure at building a brand.
Yeah.
Today, 80 to 85% of our revenues are coming from contract manufacturing work. One can generalize it as white label work, where we are the manufacturer of record, but the customer never knows that we're involved. They only see the brand on the shelf at the end of the day. We're trying to reinvigorate our own brand, in no small part because we believe that at exit, that's where the value is. And we're going back down this path for the first time in a while of asking the hard questions. What do we want to do, in what channel, with what product, in order to build a brand of value again? And how do we embody these lessons we've learned the hard way regarding channel strategy, distribution strategy? Early on, when you were introducing me, you were mentioning our path towards getting fairly ubiquitous through major distributors, major supermarket chains. And while that remains what most people see, most entrepreneurs in this category see as the primary path to growing quickly and exiting, insofar as that's their goal. Some people are doing this for a lifestyle business, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not my intention. We've been burned 3 separate times with the grow fast through major distributors using broker strategy, and burned in escalating quantities. So first time it cost us $25,000. Second time it cost us $50,000. The third time it cost us $80,000. And these become, they're extremely painful lessons, in no small part because it's not just the dollar value, it's also the amount of time sunk into these projects. So
let's play with that just a little bit.
Sure.
So you've been using brokers to help introduce you into these large distribution channels.
We have, yes.
To the major ones, which is fine. And I'm sure there's great things that could be done in there. There have been other success stories that you mentioned by name to me, like Stacy's Pita Chips or Skinny Pop or one of these others. My question for you is twofold on this. You've learned that mentors help you move your business forward. There are experts out there who have a stake in the success of your business.
Yes.
There were people who helped Skinny Pop do what they did, who helped Stacy's Pita Chips do what they did. Who are the people that are missing from your team that were present in their teams to pull that off?
This is a phenomenal question, one that I don't have all the answers to.
Okay.
In some cases, I know the folks. In some cases, I don't. So through some introductions, I've met some of the people, the principals at these success stories. And it remains opaque to me as to how replicable some of the critical moments were in these companies' histories. Part of that has to do with the category. So in 2005 to 2007, Bare Naked really pioneered the granola industry. And in the years that followed, the space became extremely crowded. And now going to a meeting with a category manager, the buyers at the supermarkets who decide which product goes onto which shelf, for our category, it's like selling oil to the Saudis. They have exactly no time for another granola vendor. Insofar as that's true, breaking through, regardless of the quality of how polished the pitch is, regardless of how good the packaging is, how good the product is, so long as there's nothing very meaningful differentiating the product, the outcomes of those meetings seem a little predetermined. If the dollars on the table available to buy the shelf space in the form of slotting are there, you will have a positive outcome to the meeting, not necessarily for the business, but a positive outcome to the meeting. If the dollars are unavailable, the likelihood of a positive outcome drop enormously.
Great.
This is for almost all cases. There are 2 dramatic exceptions, and that's Publix and Wegmans. But those are truly exceptional.
It's one of those questions that I always kind of go back to is, instead of trying to figure out what we need to do differently, sometimes it really is a who do we need to bring in differently?
Yes.
And how do I get them really caring about our success, those key players, and who else up the chain? And can I get an advisory board maybe together of people who are decision makers up the chain for some of these other success stories or whatever, that they're not just someone I may turn to, but they come together because each step along the path have people making decisions.
Yeah.
And I need to get the people who are making decisions being the ones who are helping to direct what we're doing. We want to make it as easy as possible to help them make money.
So
as easy as possible to solve
I think I can
problem.
speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
What a lot of these folks have in common that have these wild success stories in food is dramatic customer awareness and customer side pull that is informing the decision makers at the supermarkets before they make their call.
So you may be saying to me, David, this is great, and I'm going to push this hard, but maybe granola isn't cared about by the market as much anymore.
Could be.
Or let me push another way.
Yeah.
A while back, people said milk. Well, milk's a commodity, and everyone just pushes milk through, and that was great. And yeah, milk sales were stagnant in essence for a long time until there was a push by way of convenience of milk, and let's put it into small little bottles and let's sell it like bottled water.
Yeah. Or even more recently, Fairlife has made some meaningful innovations to at least the claims for nutritional quality that appear to have been successful in taking what, as you described effectively, is a commodity and genuinely differentiating a subset of that category, asking for a great deal more money per unit sold, and succeeding as a brand.
Could be the other way, but that's a long journey of educating a public to get them to see and want something new. So you have to decide what kind of money and time you have on that.
Yes.
So there's a convenience one, there's an education one, there's whatever, but it still comes down to, so who's really good at knowing and reading the market a little bit? Who's good at that? Who understands where the trends are going? And if we're creating content, are we creating content not just in how we're doing manufacturing and how to make the manufacturing of granola easier? Let's instead talk about what's the content of the healthy living, the lifestyle, the why you need these different mixes of grains and things on the regular, how to access that quickly and easily. I don't know. I almost think, you know what I haven't seen yet? I have yet to see at the grocery store in the quick grab aisle, right? The come get that spontaneous purchase stuff, the single serving granola container, whatever way that looks. You know, they used to do a yogurt one, whatever else, but whatever. Let's throw that away. I'm looking at something I could throw into my travel bag that I know I've got a healthy meal.
Yeah. This is something my dad's constantly on my case about since the beginning of the company is, can we make something cheap enough to give away? And can we tie where we're giving it away to the lifestyle that we believe it speaks most to the ideal consumer? Mm-hmm. So can we go and do some guerrilla marketing at a marathon, at a biking event, at a cross-country rally? Can we put the product into the hands of customers at a cost per customer acquisition that makes sense, that we can scale? And this is something that's very near and dear to his heart, and that I'm keen to eventually solve, that I've had little success in succeeding so far.
And so that would be a who, if this was a case of direction you wanted to go.
Yeah.
Who is good at guerrilla marketing? Yeah. Not some marketing agency. Show me someone who's gone on and done this, did the hard work, was knocking the doors, was figuring it out, was breaking in cool little ways. If that's a direction we want to go, it's not, do I have to learn how to do what they did? It's, how do I get them?
Yeah. So can we find out who's responsible for the incredible word of mouth and in-person marketing campaign of Red Bull? As they distributed across the United States, they had, I think there were Mini Coopers that had a big Red Bull can sticking out at the top of it.
That's right.
It was ubiquitous. It was everywhere, and most people became interacted with Red Bull first through the in-person experience of receiving a sample.
That's right. With certain people that looked and acted certain ways, they were the only ones who could represent Red Bull in all those locations.
Yes, this is very true.
That's right. And they were people who looked and acted and felt like the kind of people that others wanted to be like, right? And so they kind of target customer. Let's get that. Let's get everyone to kind of connect that way. And that's what we're going to go after. So funny, healthy, adventurous, drinking something that actually pulls you back, makes you less healthy, makes it more difficult for you to adventure in the long term, right? It's speaking from a granola perspective.
Sure.
So while you're solving the problems, I think just like you used the sticky about who are my mentors, I want you to think for your major problems, who are those targeted people? And how do I win them into this circle? Let's find the who's. They'll help us figure out the how a lot easier. And that would be my suggestion. And the way you'll win them is by sharing your vision of the impact you could have, or the really cool things that could be done when this thing takes off and does what it really can achieve. So those are a few thoughts. Hopefully, Sandro, that's useful to you. Our time's running short. Sandro, if people want to buy your granola or come and use you as a manufacturer of their own product, how do they contact you?
Sure. So the primary brand is gathererofgranola.com. We make it easy at ggranola.com. That's 2 G's. We also have a new organic brand called Origin, Orgin. Think of it as Origin. The mission for that company is to build the first truly sustainable consumer product in the food space that is carbon net neutral and the most sustainable of any company in its category. That's still a work in progress. We're in our 10th month of launch. Right now it's almost exclusively in bulk, but you can buy our products online. You can buy our products in natural food stores. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, but I do highly recommend just reach out to us through the website if you have any questions. So again, it's ggranola.com.
Great. Thanks so much, Sandro.
Thank you.
That wraps up this episode of the 7-Figure Journey podcast. If you found some of the things we talked about interesting or helpful, please like, share, get it to other members of this community of business owners. They too can learn from and grow their businesses. Until next time, keep striving, keep learning, keep growing, and keep caring.